All right, well, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Nathan Fox. I'm chair of the MFA Visual Narrative Program here at the School of Visual Arts. And I'd like to welcome you all to our inaugural launch of the Storyteller series, beginning this summer with the Broken Frontier Anthology. As many of you know here, but some of you may not, the MFAVN program is a low residency grad program in visual storytelling as both author and artist, so an equal balance between creative writing and visual arts in whatever profession or medium you may so choose. To which this anthology and this body of storytellers is definitely most perfect, and I'm very honored to be a part of it. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the brainchild, the kind of the force behind the anthology, Taylor Tanner, and definitely recognize him and everybody else at the anthology, the entire crew, for putting all this together and making the book possible. So a little bit about Taylor. After having taught English for 5 years in California, Tanzania, and Costa Rica, must have been tragic. Sounds like a blast. Taylor switched gears by turning his lifelong passion for comics into a career. In 2003, he went to the Cuber School, and in 2005, he launched, I always say it the back way, I always say it backwards, A Wave Blue World. A comics graphic novel publishing company for creator-owned comics with his wife, Wendy. Welcome. Taylor currently lives in Portland with Wendy and their 2 daughters. He writes for the international comics news site Broken Frontier, a bit of a relation, whose insistence on spotlighting non-mainstream publications stems from their firm belief in the power of comics as an art form and a continuing progressive evolution of the medium, and a definite site that drew my attention to Taylor and hopefully Taylor to me. Taylor also continues his passions as a writer and publisher at A Wave Blue World, and the Broken Frontier Anthology that we're all here for is a varied and rich collection of 27 stories about exploring the great unknown, brought to you by 50 of the brightest talents working across mainstream and indie comics today. And we're lucky enough to have 6 collective in total, Taylor and I, of course, here with us today. So without further delay, Taylor Tanner.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Sure. Yeah, and then, so is this ready to go? Great. There we go. Hey, thanks for coming out. It feels great to be on this side of the project, to have it out. This book has been my life for about a year and a half now, between putting it together, curating the talent and the stories in it, running the Kickstarter campaign, which is a full time job, doing the production afterwards, collecting the stories, publishing it. And then, of course, there's events like this, store signings and talks, which I really enjoy being a part of. And as much as my co-editor, Frederik Hautain, who founded Broken Frontier, which is the news website that was mentioned, whose name we used for this book, because we wanted to create this book with the same sort of attitude of that news site that you heard about, exploring new frontiers, doing things a little bit differently, creator-owned, being able to stretch ideas through comics. That's what we did this anthology about. It was really important to us when we put it together that, for one, it was an independent published project, which is why we went through my imprint, A Wave Blue World. We wanted to get a variety of talent, both US and international talent, veterans in the industry, as well as new talents that are trying to break into the industry. We wanted to do whatever we could to just make something that just really pushed the boundaries in every direction. And for all the work that we put together, curating it, and the designers that we have on it, what I'm most proud of in this book is the stories that went into it and the creators that were a part of it. Everybody did an incredible job on their work here. so impressed and happy to receive these stories as they came in. It was a joy to put together. A lot of time and work, but it was really worth it, and I'm glad to have 6 or 5, I'm not counting, I won't count myself, 5 of the creators here that were all a part of it, and I'd like to introduce the rest of them now. Should I start with, let's see, that's me. Nathan introduced me very nicely. There's my Away Blue World logo, and 2 of the titles I worked on started on Adrenaline. Down at the end, Taylor Esposito. He's a letterer, production designer. He has an establishment called Ghost Cliff Studios that he works through. Worked on titles such as Constantine and Red Hook and the Outlaws, as well as a webcomic called Heroine Chic. Now that's heroine as in female hero. Really interesting web story. I would check that out. He's also done some short stories for me and for this anthology. 2 stories in here. It's About Time and The Trip. Great, he lettered. Okay, great. Sorry, I should be. Greg Pak, filmmaker, writer, worked on a ton of mainstream stories for Marvel and DC, including Batman and Superman. Had a very popular Hulk run called Planet Hulk, sent Hulk off planet. He's following that up now, sort of with more Hulk and the totally awesome Hulk.
Yes, indeed. Sounds like a review. It's just the title.
And one of the other things I really like that he does is he's done some Kickstarters for children's books, including The Princess Who Saved Herself, which was based off of a song by Jonathan Colton. Yeah. As well as a book called ABC Disgusting, which my 2 daughters love. They also really loved watching you eat a banana with ketchup on it. That was enjoyable. Can everybody see that, or is that just for?
No, it's as part of the promo for the Kickstarter campaign, the different members of the creative team, we all, if we hit a certain number in the campaign, we all pledged to eat bananas with ketchup, and it was horrible. I don't recommend it.
That sounds unpleasant.
Yeah, I dressed up. I put on a suit. It was
yeah, that's some of the things we'll hear more about what you have to do in a Kickstarter campaign, some of the hoops you have to jump through. He also just finished one called Kickstarter Secrets.
Yes.
Incredibly relevant, how to run a successful Kickstarter campaign. So I look forward to talking more about that. Let me jump to Fred here. I read Fred's work first in Action Philosophers, which is a biography of philosophers throughout history, told in comics, which is a great way to learn about them. He also did Comic Book Comics, which is about the history of comics, really informative. He's been working on Valiant, Marvel. He did Incredible Hercules with Greg over there. That was a great series. And you have a new series coming out next week, Mystery Detectives.
I do, Weird Detective.
Weird Detectives.
Yeah, it's H.P. Lovecraft meets Law and Order.
And that first issue comes out next week, next Wednesday. Look forward to that.
You guys could use the mics when you talk.
Okay. Tom went to the same art school I did, the Kubert School. He's been working in the industry for 20 years, mostly Marvel and DC during that time, titles like X-Men, Batman. You've recently been moving to more creator-owned projects where you have a new one called Prometheus from an outfit called?
From Ominous Press.
Ominous Press, which I look forward to seeing, as well as in this book, you and Greg worked on Phantom Limb Ghost Puncher. Yes, all right. And Nathan, who was already up here, his comic work, worked on a number of Vertigo titles like DMZ, and you did the covers for what used to be called Collider. I just realized that was the old title, FPP. You did the anthology, the SFX anthology, is that correct? Yeah, as well as running this program here at the school. As I mentioned, I do want to give some credit to Frederik, who can't make it. He lives in Belgium, but he co-edited the book with me. He's the founder of Broken Frontier, as I said, the website, which we've sort of based the theme of the anthology on. And just as a way of introduction, he's the one that came to me with the idea that he really wanted to do an anthology like this, like we've described, to really kind of stretch the boundaries of what comics can do and just really do an anthology based off of all the themes that we wanted to create. And he ran that by me as someone who's been through publishing, and I wrote a column for him about my self-publishing experience. And yeah, I remember when he first ran it past me, and I was like, wow, this is going to be huge. Let me think about it. I went on a vacation with my wife and our 2 kids, like being like, well, okay, if we're going to do this, this is going to be big. I got back, and he was like, here's all the creators I have signed on for it. And it was this long list of creators. I was like, oh, okay. Some of them are in this room. Like, wow, okay. Well, we have the talent on it. I think we can do it. And we went through and we finished putting together the teams, the cover, created the Kickstarter project, and we launched a Kickstarter to create this anthology with all of these guys. And well, there's the list of all the creators and the different stories in the books, and ran the campaign. And so I'd like to start off with sending the question down the line here. As far as anthologies and getting involved, and I don't mean to sound like I was so surprised to see that you had all signed up to see your names on Frederik's list, but I just want to know, what was your appeal of coming onto an anthology and a project like this? Not to talk myself down, but someone who's it's a very small publisher and didn't want to join a larger outfit. Why take time out of your busy schedules to be part of anthology? And what kind of stories did you want to tell that you can't normally tell, in a full series? Anybody like to begin?
Yeah, I mean, Frederik contacted me, and Frederik's been great supporting my work through the website for many years. And what was cool was that I wanted to work with someone named Alison Sampson, who's a terrific artist from the UK. We did a horror story for Dark Horse's Creepy magazine, and really hit it off and became pals sort of online. And so what was cool was I said, yeah, I'll do it if I can do a story with Alison. And what was cool was that Alison was already on Frederik's list of creators. I think she'd already agreed to do it also. So that was kind of groovy. A cool thing about an anthology is it gives you an excuse to work with people you want to work with that you just haven't quite found the time yet, but it's much lower of a commitment than doing a graphic novel or a monthly series or a mini series or something like that.
Yeah, I ditto that. I mean, Tom and I had been joking around on Twitter about a year before that, about an idea I'd had for a story called Phantom Limb Ghost Puncher, about a guy who, he's lost his arm, but he's got a phantom limb, and then he finds out that phantom limb, he can punch ghosts with it. So, because it's a phantom limb, right? And I was joking about that on Twitter, and Tom was like, hey, I'd draw that. And I said, you're on, but we didn't really have a way to do it forever. And then, but then when I got the Broken Frontier call and they said the theme was sort of frontiers, it was like, okay, well, this is like a story about this, bridge between this world and a supernatural world, and that kind of fit. And it was a great chance to do a Saki type story, to kind of a proof of concept for this idea. And it's so it was a great way to do that and to work with Tom, who I'd worked with before in a Hulk thing way back when. But
that's true.
I'll let Tom plunge in there. You got anything to add?
Yeah, you don't hear a whole lot of genius ideas come along. That's one of them. When you hear it, you got to jump on it, and having a place to find a home for it. It's not an easy thing these days, so you got to take a chance.
And it's nice too because we get a little subsidy in making the thing, and then we've got something. Well, first that we're just proud of and that we had a lot of fun with, and secondly that hopefully we can use to get an actual series going or a longer graphic novel going at some point. So, knock on wood.
And on the short term, just the sheer number of great stories in there, it's kind of nice just being in there with them.
Yeah, and I mean, it was an opportunity to work with Cullen, because much like the same thing. I mean, we had been running into each other from time to time, either online or at a con. Never really had time to talk, but like, hey, yeah, we'll work, and okay. And a lot of the YA or other short stories or mini series that I had been on and pitched around, they either couldn't get picked up or wasn't right for the publisher, or it just wasn't the right time. So, especially with anthologies, it's a ton of freedom. Cullen and I, the stars finally aligned, and we got to do a rather fun book about a witch. So it was great to finally have a space and freedom to actually kind of get those short stories, those characters out, and same thing, like get something prepared to try and pitch something larger later. Yeah, and I was just flabbergasted at the invite and saw the list of everybody that was involved, and it was kind of like well, of course.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the things that once we got people on, it just made so much more sense. Everybody else was a lot more willing.
Well, and also too, like I'm fans of all the work that you guys have done. So, to have my stuff in there is quite a huge boon.
And I came on kind of late in the process. I think you contacted me on Twitter, right, Tyler?
Did I contact you on Twitter? I hardly
I think so. I
ever
think
use
you wanted me
Twitter.
for your story specifically. And as soon as you told me the concept, I was like, yeah, I'm there. And then I think Josh came in that he needed the story done and they didn't have a letter already. So you guys pulled me in too. And I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, it's a jam session. I love jam sessions.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to work on was actually the previous Vertigo anthology, CMYK. So, jumping to another one where it's like, oh, here's like 50 people I love to work with, including working specifically with certain people, was awesome. So I was there.
Yeah. And I'm kind of curious. I remember we got you on for Josh Fialikov's story. He was working with Ryan Kelly, and Ryan was originally going to letter it himself. And then it just became too difficult for his schedule. And that's why because you had already been working on It's About Time, and we got you on that one too. So it was interesting doing this and just seeing the lettering. I'm curious, as a letterer, when you come on and know that it's an anthology of a bunch of different stories, do you worry at all about the cohesion from one story to the next, the style of it?
I don't worry between stories. I try to keep my lettering to match whatever that specific story is. I mean, I think you noticed, like, what I did for your story was way different than what I did for Josh's story. Big part of my job is always like, I don't want, any letterer, you don't want to be noticed on a book. If someone's noticing your work, you're doing it wrong. So I always try to like match up with whatever's going on in the art. If it's a little bit more superhero-y, I'll make it a little bigger. If it's horror, I might roughen it up a little bit. Depends on what the look is going for. You should never know I worked on something. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You do try not to take over too much space, I think, in any, maybe the artist. You want to let the artist, I think as a writer, you kind of also want to make sure you don't get in the way too much of the visuals, taking care of the story, and lettering is part of that as well. All right, I'm going to move forward to, so when we were running this Kickstarter campaign, and as I mentioned, it was a big project. We had set the goal at, I think, just under 60,000. I do have a screenshot of the, there we go. Yeah, there's what the Kickstarter page looks like. Yeah, $58,000 goal. Yeah, that's not a video. Yeah, it was a major undertaking. We had 30 days to raise that kind of money, get people interested to see our campaign. And are you guys mostly familiar with the concept of Kickstarter and how it works? You create a project, this is what we want to do. Kickstarter gives you a great platform as far as providing video and content and rewards to get people involved. And if you fund the project, if you reach your goal, you get that funding. If you don't reach the goal, you don't get anything. They're an all or nothing sort of thing. So that adds some tension to it as you're trying to work your way up there. Especially when you get high enough and you're like, well, all right, we've raised 40,000, 50,000. Do we really want to see that all go away if we don't quite make it? And what you learn when you're doing these campaigns is it really does become a full-time job. You have to run a campaign, and you're constantly doing things to put the word out and to just keep momentum going. One of the things with a 30-day campaign, there's dips and valleys. There's high points where you get people's attention, and then it kind of goes through some lulls, and you have to constantly keep it pushing and going. And we ran this one all the way up to the end. We definitely positive response. We're getting media coverage, Comics Alliance, CBR. They're all like reviewing it, so people knew about it. It was just one of those things where we needed to get on top of the momentum, and we finally did it. And so sort of the next question to run for the class, to the group here, running a Kickstarter campaign, anything that you learned from this Kickstarter in particular, being part of it, because all of you actually did a fantastic job. We got a lot of support on social media, throwing in extra rewards at the end, doing blog posts about it, really rallied the troops as far as the creators getting behind it. Yeah, we finally made it at the final hours. I remember talking with Gray, I think the night of that it was ending, and we're like, it's still going, we're almost there. We made it at the end there. Anyone like to speak on advice for Kickstarters? Best things to do when you're running a campaign, or how to be successful? Craig, do you want to kick off since you?
Yeah, well, that's a big topic. I actually just ran a Kickstarter for a book of Kickstarter advice called Kickstarter Secrets. And thankfully that was successful, because it would have been pretty bad if that Kickstarter hadn't gone through. But yeah, I mean, I've done a few over the years, and including Kickstarters for Code Monkey Save World, which was a big graphic novel based on the songs of Jonathan Colton, and then the Princess Who Saved Herself book and the ABC Disgusting book that Tyler was mentioning. And then I've been kind of peripherally involved with a few others. Like I helped Fred when he did his Kickstarter, helped him shoot his video for a Kickstarter he did for a play about Jack Kirby. And then I helped out a bit with the Broken Frontier Kickstarter as well. But so if you want all of my advice, go to kickstarter-secrets.com, and you can pre-order.
How many people
the
are
ebook.
seriously considering right now doing something crowdfunding with Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or any one of those things?
All right,
So, okay,
cool.
a good chunk.
I mean, the one-liner, my little small nugget of advice is to pick a project that fits your career and your network right now, and that means that means don't be afraid to do a very small-scale project. In fact, embrace that. I think the biggest problems I've seen with Kickstarters tend to be when folks are kind of hoping for a miracle, and that does happen.
You mean in terms of the size of the ask?
Exactly. Like
Broken Frontier?
Yeah. Well, this was a big ask. I mean, it was like I recommend being realistic. You know what I mean? Like Kickstarter the tools are fantastic, and they will help you build your audience. But you have to have some kind of audience to begin with. What Kickstarter is really great at is letting you make the most of whatever audience you have.
Well, and the nice thing about doing an anthology, of course, is that you've got 50 creators, most of which one would hope would go out there on their Twitter feed and on Facebook and everywhere else, or in some cases pledge themselves to go out there and really be your spokespeople. And I think that's definitely what happened with you guys,
Yeah, though I mean, we really had to ring the bell. It wasn't just as simple as just being like Twitter blast to our, because I think all of it added up to 300,000 Twitter followers, but of course not just sending out one blast and sending everybody running, So
I think the best piece, I don't know if this reflects your experience, Greg, but the best piece of advice I felt like I got was my buddies Scott and Brian, who do a great comic called Atomic Robo and have done a bunch of successful Kickstarters. They said ask for as little money as possible. Like, ask for the absolute minimum you can get, because as you pointed out, if you don't raise that ask, you don't get squat diddly.
At the same time, make sure that what you were asking for will actually let you do the project you want to do.
And that's where, if you don't mind me jumping in, that's where we kind of got in trouble. When we came up with that $58,000, we're like, we were really committed to doing that, between the pay for the creators, the production and printing of the book, sending it out. We couldn't actually do it for less. So as much as we're like, wow, that's a big ask, like you said, we were kind of stuck. Like, that's what we made. That's what that's what that would cost.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you have to weigh it. You know what I mean? And sometimes you're going to reach a little bit beyond what your audience may be ready for, and then you just got to really hustle. But for first-time projects, it's like, I always point to my friend Amy Chu. Amy Chu is a writer, comics writer, who kind of came out of nowhere just a few years ago. She came to comics writing late it was like her second or third career. And she just hustled, and she's really good, and she worked really hard, and she made a few short stories with some artists. She recruited some artists, did a few short stories, and then she ran some very modest Kickstarters, to print those up.
Do you remember how modest?
Like $3,000, $4,000.
Yeah, like so she even had like a 2,000 one, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, maybe her goal was $2,000 or $2,500, and then she got like $3,000 or $4,000. And that was realistic given the kind of audience she had. But then she did that, and she built an audience, and took the next step, and she just finished writing a Poison Ivy series or miniseries for DC. You know what I mean? It's finding the thing that matches whatever level you're at.
Well, and the practical reason for having a low ask, and this is I think something that you guys probably figured out is this is a social medium, right? It's a social way to do things. People like winners, right? And they want to know that you're. So if you ask for $1 million, people are going to be like, "You're nuts! It's not going to happen." And the closer you get to the goal, and again, this is definitely something that happened the last weekend, I think, with the Broken Frontier. The closer you get to the goal, the more pledges you get, and it's because people want to be part of something that's going to be successful. They don't want to be part of something that's doomed to go down in flames. So that's, I think, an excellent reason to keep your Kickstarter ask as low as possible, because then also very frequently the successful Kickstarters go over their goal, sometimes by an incredibly significant amount, sometimes by 10-20%. So that I thought was the best single piece of advice I got.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, and you want to have a story. You want to have a reason for media outlets to pick up your story. And I can tell you, as writing for Broken Frontier, the news site as well, and we get people sending us their press releases. The one thing we can't put up on the site that just doesn't work really well is, please help this Kickstarter that's halfway through its campaign and it's struggling, type like, because people send it out all the time sort of desperately, and there's not a story there. There's a story when it first begins, like, this is new, this is the new project, and there's a story when it's successful, like, this is happening. Do you want to be part of it too? And that's why logo helps, if you can afford to do it on that lower goal. And then once you're successful, once you get close to it, and once you're successful, the momentum sort of builds. So if you can manage to have a lower goal.
Also, regarding that thought of like having things to talk about in the middle of the campaign, like you can get more press in the middle if you, like, let's say you launch your thing with a certain amount of art. Halfway through, you release half of the thing as a big preview, and then you get another chunk of press around that time when you release a preview, like the sites.
And then once you've stretched goals, which are additional goals to get unlocked if you make X amount of dollars past your initial ask and stuff. I
mean, this gets into the nitty gritty of it. The other one, like, really big piece of advice I would give is pick a project that you really, really, really care about. Like it has Kickstarters are really for passion projects. You know what I mean? That's sort of the ethos of the site.
They take over your life, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're going to be doing it 24/7.
Yeah, and but it's also, I mean, like, the reason people will pay $5 more for a book on Kickstarter than they would if they walked into a bookstore is because they're supporting something that feels special, a project that feels like somebody's very personal passion project, and they want to be part of that. So picking a project that you really care about on that level, is important. Also, yeah, exactly, because you're going to have to.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a crappy day job, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that was also one of the major reasons why, or at least Cullen and I, were down for it, and I'm sure you guys as well, because that passion project was there. So, meanwhile, all of this business and Kickstarter is cooking, and we're like the kids in the playground going nuts. Trying to get all this stuff out that we finally get a chance to play around with, and it became like this great kind of give and take type situation where it just kept kind of perpetuating itself.
Right.
At least behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, and then one of the things, as you mentioned before, we released more artwork along the way. When we started it, we had a lot of the preview images people had done, like I had shown you before with that Ghost Puncher image, where this is what we are going to do. But we realized along the way people want to see that this is actually happening too, because sometimes you get Kickstarters that, oh, this is a plan for me to do it in the future, and you give them your money, the people back it, and then they're wondering like, oh, is this really going to happen, and when is it going to get done? So along the way, if you can show pages are starting to get done and the creators believe in it and are behind it, that's helpful as well.
Yeah, we cut a second trailer.
Yeah, that's right.
About that was like in the second week or the third week.
Yeah, right in the middle when we're kind of in that.
Yeah,
that
which
lull.
included just a lot of the images that had come in since the thing had started.
I was bad. I didn't write my story until you guys made until your Kickstarter was successful. So just in case. I'm busy.
Yeah, well, then that's something to think about, especially if you're doing an anthology. Like, is this something that you are only going to do if it's successful? And if so, will the creators do their story anyway? I mean, that was one of the things we were sort of dealing as editors. Well, some of these people are waiting to see if the Kickstarter is successful. Some of them are doing it just sort of on faith. Some of them are doing it because they know they want to do the story anyway, and they're just hoping for a home for it. But that's something you have to balance along the way. Like, how much are you going to do in advance, regardless of whether the Kickstarter succeeds? Yeah, Tom, do you want to?
Well, from what I've seen, paying attention to the site, the ones that seem to have the easiest time going through it are the ones that do have a lot to show.
Yeah.
That they can parse it out as it goes along. You don't want to show it all at once. But there does seem to be a bit of a pushback for people that are looking to raise money to fund doing the book. People love to give money to print the book, right. But they want to know it's there.
Yeah, in some ways it's almost become like a pre-sale. Like, it doesn't have to exactly be done, but if you're like, we made this book, please help us print it, do production, get it out there.
You can get away with a little bit more of a lead time if if you've already got a rep, that they've seen you, like Greg, turn around Kickstarter projects. They've seen results being made, but somebody just walking in for the first time, they're going to want to see more.
Yeah, as you mentioned before, if you don't have you need to have an audience already that's seen your work, or you need to show a lot of work to say, hey, this is what I'm doing on this project. To kind of just come in with just a dream, is probably not enough, unless it's a really low, entry level type thing. Anybody else on this topic, Taylor?
One of the earliest Kickstarters I joined up with, I had just started lettering. I'd just come off of having a production job over at Marvel, just started teaching myself lettering. The writer was unknown, the artist was unknown. I had the biggest cred, and I had no cred. And that Kickstarter failed like almost immediately. And it wasn't because it was a bad book, it's just we had no following. So we regrouped, we made more of the book, and then put it out again. And that second time, we actually doubled our funding so we could do the first and second issue. So it's one of those things where like you really do have to.
And did you make it the second time?
We made it the second time. We got both issues out,
That's
and
huge.
Unfortunately, I had to leave the project after that. But it was enough momentum for these people to get started and get some following.
I've heard Craig Engler, who used to work at Kickstarter, used to do panels like this, and one of the things that he would say is that second-time Kickstarters had a very high success rate. I mean, in a way, which is another way of saying failure is not the end of the world on Kickstarter. You know what I mean? It's incredibly disappointing, of course. But folks who had one failed Kickstarter, then came back and tried again, have very high success rates because it's not impossible.
If you're in the arts, getting used to failure is often a very good idea psychologically.
Absolutely.
Well, and you learn a lot. I mean, we learned a lot. I learned a ton on this Kickstarter project, and luckily we succeeded, just barely, but learned so much. You feel so much. I think that's why you have people come back whether they failed or not. It's like, I've learned all these skills. I have all this knowledge now. I might as well, keep it going. Plus, you build a following too. There are a good amount of people that back Kickstarter, so you have to keep that in mind too. As much as you want your own following, like online, Twitter followers don't necessarily transition into backers. There are people that back Kickstarters. You want to be able to get their attention, and that's why I look at other Kickstarters that have been successful and realize, the people that back this, like projects, are the people whose attention that I want to get. So follow the things that have made their campaign a success. A Kickstarter is a great resource as far as keeping these people engaged too. They send out newsletters, keep people involved. They have a great interface. So learn the Kickstarter system. That's sort of its own world as well, not just your own website or your own following as well. Keep that involved. Okay, on that note, we can open this back up on Q&A if anyone has more questions about Kickstarters. I want to transition into the topic of creator-owned, because this is a creator-owned anthology. Just another point I want to make. All the stories in these are owned completely outright by the creative team of this book. They're free to take these stories themselves and further the future of these characters into whatever they want to do, whether they want to do more short stories or a series like that. And as I mentioned, some of their bios, some of you are transitioning from work for hire into creator-owned. So I want to talk about your own experience as far as working on your own creator-owned books that you own outright, and why that's appealing, and what the balance is between work for hire, maybe say you're a paycheck. And even Taylor, I'd like to get your perspective as well as lettering, because I know you do both. You've lettered for DC, you do independent projects and webcomics as well. Yeah, just do you see the industry going that way? What's the draw for you? Anything on that topic? Yeah. Anybody want to?
Well, I think that, in the arts, it's always smart to have a diversified revenue stream, which is sort of a fancy way of saying do both creator-owned and work for hire. The way the market is right now, in comics at least, nobody's going to hire you to do Spider-Man or Batman or Power Rangers or Ghostbusters or whatever the licenses they have, unless you've proven almost always in the creator-owned realm that you can already do the job. So it's really a two-way street, right? Because the creator-owned people the work for hire people, as we call it, the licensed stuff, hires from people doing their own stuff. If you do hire profile corporate-owned properties, that then gets more eyeballs on your creator-owned stuff. So I think that it's just this sort of continuous, or it should be at least, ideally, this continuous kind of water cycle of, I think it was Clint Eastwood as a director who said, do one for them and then do one for you. And I think that's a great attitude to have, because it is, unless you are ridiculously lucky and successful and talented and all those wonderful things, it is very hard for most people to earn a living doing only their creator-owned comics. It's very tough. So most people supplement that income with, doing TV show, things related to TV shows and video games and, whatever else. Spider-Man,
Yeah, what he said. The other thing I'd add is that I started off in film school. Way back when, I started off as a kid writing short stories and drawing cartoons, and then I went to film school and I made a bunch of short films, and I made a feature film called Robot Stories. And then I got a meeting with Marvel and ended up writing comics. And then in recent years, I've been writing kids' books as well, and I'm still doing film and TV stuff. Basically, what I'm saying is seize every opportunity you have for storytelling. If what you want to do is tell stories, jumping on different media, I think, is a smart thing. Assuming you enjoy different media, you know what I'm saying? But I think I love all of these different. I'm working on a novel right now too. You know what I mean? I love all of these different venues, and so it's creatively fulfilling to do these kids' books at the same time I'm doing these work for hire comics. But it also ends up, as Fred said, as really good business sense. Having a range of things means that you've got more different kinds of things that might hit. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's work for hire or creator-owned, you don't really know if it's going to go over. Sometimes you do your very best work and it doesn't really sell. You know what I mean? And even though in your heart, and everybody else, your colleagues know that it's really your best work. You can't really control that all the time. You can definitely do things to help stuff along. Sometimes stuff that you're not the most proud of sells the best. But having a variety of things going on means that you've got a good shot, or you improve your chances of having something go over, rather than having all your eggs in one basket. So, but along those lines too is, here's just a real practical example. I started doing more comic book conventions after I had these creator-owned books to sell, The Code Monkey and Princess Who Saved Herself and ABC Disgusting. So when I go to lay out my table at a comic book convention, I've got 2 different kids' books. I've got Batman, Superman, I've got Action Comics, I've got The Incredible Hulk, I've got a book about making comics called Make Comics Like the Pros that Fred and I co-wrote. So I've got a big range of stuff. And so and I've got Storm, and I've got Magneto Testament, which is the origin story of Magneto. That's actually a Holocaust story. So it's a real range of stuff. And almost anybody who walks up can see something that's sort of interesting. So having a variety of
no soul,
unless they're just bad people, which happens sometimes. It's sad, all those bad people who walk by and don't give me money. I feel bad for them. But just having that kind of variety is not only creatively fun, but it's just in a very practical way. You go to a con, you got more stuff. You got a better chance of hooking in random person walking by.
Yeah. Yeah, and I started out as an illustrator, as finding the only means to tell stories through magazines and other publications and periodicals. But in reality, my ambitions were to have my own animation series, direct a film someday, write a comic book, and I didn't know how to do any of that, other than like a passion for it and just a drive to kind of go forward. So the opportunity to kind of jump into this, I also didn't really know what I wanted to say. I hadn't really had that much experience, and I'd become familiar with, license work or work for hire, most definitely, especially through illustration. So when that cliff time came to jump, my doorway was through license and work for hire. And throughout the entirety of it, it was really just kind of an education as well as a discovery of, well, how in the world do I actually tell stories, right? And what is it that I actually want to say? How do I want to say it? What type of books? What kind of stories are even mine? I have subject matter and things that I'm truly interested in and where I come from. But then, through, regardless of my adult editorial twisted side, same thing, kids books and young adults, becoming a father and losing my manhood probably helped. But having those interests and those drives, as well as starting to have a bit of a range, or at least a handle on how stories worked for me. That really became my interest and discovery into independent work, as well as finding partners and collaborators who are either in the same place or recognize those drives or those interests and kind of that voice. And it really becomes a great partnership. And I wholeheartedly believe that balance between the two, one only can inform the other. And if anything, it just kind of becomes an arsenal and a portfolio of validation, let alone the mass amount of education and understanding as to what it is you want to put it out, how you want to put it out, and an understanding of the medium and the form to boot. Because everybody kind of knows how to tell a story or do a comic until you got to do it, and then once you kind of do that, you really start to understand the weight and the reality of what that really means, and what you truly want to say or what you actually have to say. So that kind of becomes that evolution and interest, at least on my end, for that creator-owned drive.
Along those, you opened something up in my head, which is that work for hire, I learned so much by doing work for hire, when you're doing work for hire, you kind of have to give it the same, hopefully you get offered projects and you jump on projects and accept projects that you really care about, you have to invest it with the same emotional love that you give all your creator-owned work. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You know what I mean? You have to fall in love with those characters the same way. But I was just going to say that work for hire is awesome because you learn. It particularly in comics, it's so intense, and there's so much that has to get done in such a short amount of time. And you get that book out, and then there's another one, and another one, and another one, and with each one, you're learning so much. And that's like going to school for free.
There's nothing like getting paid to play.
No, it's better than it's being paid to go to school.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. So I highly recommend it.
Tom, do you mind if I ask you, because you're someone who worked almost exclusively Marvel and DC, work for hire, and just now you're making that switch. As we mentioned, Prometheus for a new outfit called Ominous Press, Ghost Puncher, you might go into. What was the appeal to go from working exclusively work for hire, now doing creator owned?
Well, some of it's the freedom of being able to do it the way that you want to do it, and some of it's financial. In that, comics doesn't really give you a retirement. So it's nice to have something that you own that hopefully can take care of you down the line. But for me, the most important thing, obviously money's important, but being able to do something that I can say, this page, that's exactly what I want to do, without somebody up the corporate ladder saying, well, we can't use that anymore, we can't do that anymore. It's nice to be able to do that and take the responsibility. If I do it wrong, it's me. If I do it right, it's me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we had mentioned that it used to be, creator-owned used to sort of be exclusively like the training ground. You would do that first to break in, as we mentioned, prove that you could do it, make your way. You'd see someone have a hit indie series, and the next thing you know, they're writing X-Men or Spider-Man. And I've seen more and more of kind of going the other way as well. Now people are back and forth, but now they've made their name in the work for hire, and they're like, well, let's see how it goes in the creator-owned, where I can have ownership of the property. And as you mentioned, work for hire is great. Someone else is paying you to do it, but they can also decide whenever they want to stop.
Well, we should also point out that most people here all went through the treadmill of Marvel and DC. There's lots of other options, and particularly today, regular book publishers are publishing graphic novels. There's web comics. There's American created manga. So it's not like our stories are the only stories, I guess, is all I'm saying, our own personal experiences.
The webcomic thing actually is, that's a whole another huge industry. I'm saying industry, actually, you know what I mean? Because if you look at, and kind of to curl it back to the Kickstarter thing, if you look at the top grossing Kickstarters in comics, almost all of them are webcomics that went to print. So folks did these webcomics for nothing for years and years. They were selling ads or doing merch and that kind of stuff to make some money, presumably. But yeah, they built up that audience, and then they did these.
They exploited.
Yeah, no, it's great because people, they built up this dedicated group of fans who really wanted the physical books when they come out, and then they can do a big, stocky, impressive physical book. A lot of those are. Those are six-figure Kickstarters up there. It's pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah, and they've shown that the material is there. They've built the audience. Now they're just using Kickstarter as a platform to get it out. Taylor, I'd like to ask you. Speaking of webcomics, you worked on the Heroin
Chic, and now Dents.
Oh, okay.
Also from Webtoons. Those were interesting because with Heroin Chic, I actually inherited it from another letterer. He couldn't continue the project, and a friend of mine, one of the colorists on that story, recommended me, and I guess David, the writer, heard enough about me from other people. So he came out to me, asked me if I wanted to do it. I was like, yeah, it sounds like fun, something different. Because up to that point, my entire career, until I went freelance recently, has been superheroes. If I can backtrack a second, I got out of college, just started as production guy at Marvel. Was there for about 5 years. When the big Marvel layoffs happened, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, so I started learning how to letter. Within a year, I was already back at DC now on staff, where I was there for like 2.5, 3 years. So, except for that little brief period of time where I was just kind of feeling around, my entire life has been in corporate and, superhero stuff. When I finally left, I was like, all right, I need something different. So something like that comes along where it's like, all right, it's a fashion comic. I know nothing of fashion. At the time, my wife was picking out my clothes, let's be honest. So, all right, this is something new, something different, something to kind of branch out in. And I had a blast. It was just something where it's like, all right, the only person saying what to do is the writer. I just have to please him. Otherwise, I'm free to do whatever I want. And that's very freeing. Because, as much as I love, superhero comics, all that stuff, you are working down a hierarchy. What does the editor want? What does the writer want? What does the artist want? What does the company want? And you're kind of limited in what you're allowed to do,
Well, and also you sometimes end up lettering something twice, right?
Well, I mean,
That's a whole nother thing.
things will
but,
happen. I
yeah.
mean, anything can happen. The wrong script gets sent out. They change directions mid-story, and sometimes you're just going to redo a book 2 or 3 times. With the creator own, for the most part, the plan going in, and unless there's just something that doesn't work, that's it. That's all it is.
Well, and it's nice to be a part of that too.
Well, yeah,
I
I have a creative say now. I get to design a little more. I get to be like, all right, well, let's do something different with just these straight up balloons. I still try to stay hidden. I'm not supposed to be the star of the show. But
Although you are.
Never, not even in my own house. Come on. But if I get a chance just to do something that hasn't been done before, then there's that creative, what's the word I'm looking for, accomplishment, And the thing is too, there's so many letters out there today. You look at the other guy, like, he did something cool, I want to steal that, Like, lettering is mostly stealing from other people. Anything great in lettering was probably stolen from John Workman or Gaspar Saldino or somebody. So there's always going to be something you're going to rip off from someone else and make your own. And sometimes it works, and sometimes you're ripping off, but it's an homage, so we're okay with it.
But that freedom too. I mean, a lot of the control that we don't have. I mean, this is a great time for the medium in and of itself and it's obviously showing through. And coming through and definitely starting to take over. And obviously, the big 2+ are starting to notice and take advantage of it. But that freedom to really kind of push the medium further, to do things that you haven't seen, do things editors have just flat out told me there's no way I can sell that. It's cool, but we don't have a production budget for that, or there's no way we can pull this off. That's the wrong direction to take the story because we planned it 5 issues down, and I wish we had known that earlier. There's so many things that kind of go into the business of licensed and mainstream work that when you actually own that story, you can tell a story that and be part of a story that you want to read, which isn't necessarily what work for hire always is. It is amazing, and sometimes you get opportunities to create characters or tell stories or have, a slight bent in kind of, the grand plan of things. But to be able to have that freedom in total to actually contribute something that heads in a unique direction is massively inspiring, and, I think has provided a lot of advancement for, the reason why we're here, and the reason, one of the great advances in creator-owned and self-published comics that's kind of having a boom right now. It's original content. It's not the same, as much as I love them, but didn't grow up with them. The same superheroes over and over. They die, they come back. Like the story never.
Sometimes they're Nazis.
Yes, the story never stops. But to kind of break out of like the quote-unquote mold, and kind of move through is massively inspiring.
It's an exciting time, I think. I don't think there's ever been a time when it was, I won't say easy, but when there has been this much opportunity for independent comics people but it requires business savvy. You know what I mean? Like
from the creators.
Yes, exactly. Like if you're willing to kind of figure out the business at the same time as you're figuring out your craft, the opportunities are endless right now. I mean, the audience is reachable and monetizable, to use a dirty word, in ways that were very hard earlier. You know what I mean? Like, it used to be the only way you could sell your comic if you were doing an indie is to take it around the country and go to cons, right? You know what I mean? Like, or mail order and stuff. You know what I mean? And now
on your rotary phone.
Pigeon Express. But the opportunities are tremendous, but but they're constantly, but it's also confusing because everything's constantly changing. You know what I mean? Like the digital world is by its very nature a world of flux, and so the tools that work right now may not be the tools that work next week. But if but still, it's an exciting time.
if I can touch on something, the business side of it is very important, because I think a lot of people going like, I'm an artist, I'm just going to draw, I'm just going to write. No. My life, when I'm not lettering, and probably half of it at this point, answering emails, talking to clients, dealing with invoices, this and that. Your life is not just doing whatever you love. It's also all the hard parts that need to be done. And I've seen a lot of people who've just like failed and disappeared because they couldn't handle that. Yeah. And you know, they have to get a regular job because they can't afford to work anymore.
They have the talent, they seem very promising, and you're wondering where they went, and they just couldn't deal the day-to-day life of.
Like it really does become where you have multiple jobs even though you work for yourself. And it's really just, you gotta learn to deal with it and push on, because otherwise it'll crush you.
And on that note.
That's true. well, and on that note, I mean, that's why I think having an anthology and projects like this allow you to try, new ideas as a collective, to put something out where everybody had like a nice test, story, 8, 10, 12 pages, get the reaction from fans, see if they want to take it further, get their toe in the water as far as what it's going to be like running this creator-owned story, marketing themselves, and I'm very interested to see where Dark World, The Beard, Phantom Limb, Ghost Puncher, go from here if they have life outside of this anthology. I know we have some great stories in here that were one-offs, and we have some things that you might see, in the future. Great. And on that note, I think we'll transition into the Q&A. If people have questions. Oh, one note about that, because we're recording this and we have the mics. Any questions we're going to repeat before we answer, just so that it's on video. It's just so you understand. Okay. Another note. Actually, I'm going to put this up here. So here is, it looks like Twitter was the social media. These are our names again. If you want to stay connected with us, see what we're up to, here are our handles right here. That would be the best way to do that. Feel free to jot those down and see what people are up to moving forward. All right, I'm going to sit down here and question and answer. I guess, am I running the question and answer Q&A?
Sure.
Anybody have any questions?
Anybody have any Qs?
Either for the group, or you can address somebody specifically. That's a good question. The question, she's about to launch a Kickstarter and she wants to know how far in advance of the campaign she should put together her press release packets, her PR packets, and start marketing the campaign. I would definitely say that your pre-campaign is very important. That's actually something we didn't touch on too much. You need to put the time ahead of time. You shouldn't just be running around once the campaign starts to get the word out and get people interested. Do that first. I wouldn't start the actual media, like sending out press releases, too far in advance. Get those lined up, ready to go for the launch. So it's out. This is brand new. This just launched. Have a look at it. There's some incentive to report on it right away because it's new. Before that, announce it to your social media followers. You can start maybe an email list, or let people know, show some preview images, do some teaser images, get people excited about it a week, 2 weeks in advance, but have everything else as far as your images for the campaign, your press releases, have that ready to go day one. You want to start off.
Yeah, I mean, I would go so far as say is that if you've got a social media presence and if you've got interviews lined up or news stories lined up, I would hold off on those until the moment the Kickstarter goes live, because you want to force multiplier and on that moment of excitement right as quickly as possible. You don't want to tell people 2 weeks later and then have them forget about it when the thing goes live. You want to be, if you know buddies of yours are going to pledge, or people who donated your previous Kickstarter, you want them to be able to go to the Kickstarter and pledge the nanosecond they hear about it.
I would recommend talking, like if you have press contacts, reach out to them a month ahead of time and say, hey, I'm going to be launching this Kickstarter. Would you be interested in interviewing me or running an article to coincide with the launch? They do this. This won't be alien speak to them. They're totally used to doing interviews and holding them for, and then running them on the day the thing launches. Top loading that as much as possible is great. Having like, if you've got the resources, having 4 or 5 things come out on that day is fantastic, because you want that first day to be big, you know, because it's going to trough off, you know, in the second, third week.
Yeah, because it goes back to that idea of you want to appear as successful as possible, and the best way to do that is to be as successful as possible. And so if you can hit an important milestone, whether that's 20% of your goal, 50% of your goal, the really lucky people make 100% of their goal the first day, like, that's awesome. And so the best way to do that is to concentrate that attention very quickly, right as soon as the campaign is launched and goes live.
When I was working on Strange Wit, the Kickstarter for that one, the writer, Katie, set everything up months in advance. She had a contact list of like 20 or 30 websites, magazines, whatever, anyone she wanted to hit, with a contact person she'd already spoken to, just saying, I'm going to be contacting you for something soon. She had me design the logo. She had the artist do up test images, everything. We were ready to go probably 6 months before we actually started. And then it was just a matter of like setting up a timetable. It was like, all right, 2 weeks before, we're going to open up the Twitter and just start tweeting stuff slowly, getting the word out. Then we're going to start, you know, showing off some of the images. And, you know, it was calculated. It was like, by the time we got to the launch date, there was already a buzz for that book. People knew who we were writing about. They knew what the book was going to be about. They knew somewhat what the format was going to be, and then it just went off.
And I've also heard too of people not being afraid to ask for help or asking for those contacts ahead of time, especially reaching out through their own contacts to reach additional ones, or even just kind of shooting for the stars and, you know, contacting mainstream, you know, publications, websites, magazines, you know, just to let them know that it's there. And then starting, one person started teasing out their work to the writers they wanted to write about their work, and they eventually got one or two of them, I think, down the line. But they at least started, I think it was like a couple of months out before anything even went, just to kind of draw that press in. But they also had a secondary stage planned for whenever that stuff came out, there was something else folding through. So it was kind of a progressive release, as opposed to like one massive launch and just like a bleed through to the end. Everybody keeps their fingers crossed.
Yeah. With all of my campaigns, the first time anybody in public knew what the project was the day of the launch. I would tease that I've got a new project coming on Twitter. And I might tease like part of an image or something like that. But this is just, your results may vary. You know what I mean? Like different, like Taylor's talking about like something that was totally effective, being much more explicit about it ahead of time. For whatever reason, like with all my projects, we've saved it all until that day, and then you know, so that's another way to go. But to make that work, you have to have multiple places coming out and talking about it all at once. Also, along those lines, it's like, I will also say on Twitter, you know, hey, if you want to interview me, let me know. You know what I mean? And I would do interviews with blogs I'd never heard of also. You know what I mean? Because you never know. Fascinating thing is that Kickstarters, well, you know this because you've done one, but Kickstarter will give you some stats and tell you where click-throughs came from. You know, when somebody actually pledges, sometimes it'll show up what site they clicked through from. And every once in a while, some of the little seemingly obscure blogs are the ones that you get a dozen people from those blogs, and maybe you get 6 people from the really well-known sites. You know, small, passionate niches is that's where Kickstarter goes nuts. I mean, that's you know, getting those. I've got these friends who are doing these Cthulhu books, like Cthulhu kids books, you know, and there is this niche of people who are really excited about Cthulhu-related cultural product, and they got tapped into that. And you know, so if you have those niches, reach out, find those niches.
Well, and especially too because of who those people are, especially in like YA and like kids books, the librarians, the teachers, administrators, supportive staff, they're parents, they're buyers, they're fans too, and you never really know where those are headed. So I wholeheartedly agree. If there happens to be niche or a direction, I would definitely do research into, the theme of the anthology, who it would reach out to, any kind of bracketed, categories that you might be able to find those contacts or those groups or, those blogs or even columns. You never know where other people's newsletters go. There's a ton of related material that's out there, and really considering, if not understanding your audience in total, but at least doing the research to discover who your audience is and where they are and where they go. That little bit of data research from because I've been part of Kickstarters, but I haven't launched one yet. But from what I understand, and then Greg and everybody talking online, and in these secret email chains that we have, that it is massively successful, as well as just social media in and of itself being a business. That is part and parcel to getting the word and the vibe out way ahead of time, and then having a massive launch and response.
Oh, one more quick note. Kickstarter allows you to set the page up first before it's going live. I would recommend setting that page up, getting it all ready to go with enough time. Anybody that has done successful Kickstarters or pledges to Kickstarters, have them take a look at it, give it a read through, see if anything doesn't work for them or see if they have any advice. Take advantage of that.
And always make a video. For some reason, the video, the rate of success for projects that don't have a video versus those that do is just very much weighted towards people who make the video. So get over your camera shyness, kill that part of you that can feel shame, and rev up the camera that's mounted on your laptop.
Well, and so, some people have done videos that nobody's been talking into it. They've just shown. I don't know what the success rate of that is versus someone talking.
And you can tell from the metrics, like maybe 20% of the people actually watched my video that Greg very kindly shot for me,
right,
and edited. But yeah, for whatever reason, I think it's.
Well, I think people don't.
It's more professional.
They don't necessarily watch it all the way through. They like to click it and start it and see something going, but then they kind of move on to. Well, let me look at the rewards now.
I get it.
Yeah. So they want us to make it short. Doesn't 2 minutes at the most. I don't know, or unless you really have something. Keep it short. People probably won't watch it all the way through. They'll show you those stats. Don't worry about it. Just make it in clear, concise, and then have everything in text as well.
And copy editing.
Yeah. That's part of having somebody look through it.
Get it approved.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? No.
How many? Oh, sorry.
In what ways are you marketing the book now?
Right now, mostly doing events and going around. We kind of had the push when it came out, and we had the Kickstarter event. Then we had when it was actually around. One of the things about doing the fulfillment of this book, which I found, which was interesting, is I had to send out about 800 copies of these. So there's sort of like the news, like, oh, it's out, we're getting it around, and but you don't want to start selling it to everybody before everybody who's backed the book has gotten their rewards, and there are still people that haven't gotten their rewards. I'm either still getting them, their artwork has to come to them, or they're just waiting for customs clearance on their book. So we are kind of conscious of not making a big sort of public sale of the book, but it is available on the website. We're doing events, and we're almost through the stock of this hardcover, which it was sort of meant to be for Kickstarter fans. I mean, we're happy to have copies outside of that, and then we'll sort of see once we're through these hardcovers. I mean, we think a lot of this material will live outside of it afterwards. And that it'll just always be something that's nice to have to see where those started. But we'll look into whether we do a softcover edition or another edition once those are gone. It's also available digitally. It's on Comixology apps and in PDFs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there is a disadvantage to Kickstarter, and this isn't universally true, but I am concerned that the marketing push and getting people's attention to the project gets expended during the actual campaign itself. And then once the actual artwork or book or product or film or whatever it is, by the time that comes out, a lot of that is dissipated. I don't think that's true for every single project that's ever existed, but I do worry for a lot of projects, you're blowing your marketing wad
Well, you're both
on the actual getting the word out about the campaign as opposed to the thing itself.
right, and then it's mostly about fulfillment. Like, here, thank you
Right.
for making this happen. Here's the book. Thanks for letting us have some extras to take around to shows and stuff.
It's, I mean,
Just to throw some negativity out there.
yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing though is that all that marketing up front means that you get to make the book. You know what I mean? And if you've planned it properly, ideally,
Yeah,
then,
the alternative is no project.
Yeah.
Then
well,
what are you gonna do?
Because Kickstarter, I mean, like, it's not just making the book; it's also distributing it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, getting the book out into the world is part of the whole thing. So, you know, like some projects, they hit their audience with the Kickstarter. You know, the 500 or 1,000 people that thing goes to, that's the people who are meant to buy that book. And if it's successful, that's fantastic. And if that's all that ever happens with it, that's still fantastic. But I think there is this a learning thing that we're all doing right now, which is figuring out, okay, I made a book that a lot of people backed and a lot of people really enjoyed, and now I want to keep getting it out in the world. How do I do that? And folks like C. Spike Trotman are kind of, I think, she's got a company called Iron. She's known as Iron Spike on Twitter, and she's done a whole bunch. She's done a number of anthologies, and now she's becoming a publishing house in her own right. And I'm actually going to interview her for Kickstarter Secrets. And I can't wait because I want to pick all her brain. I want to pick her brains and steal all her secrets, because she's doing stuff right now where she's talking to publishing companies, you know, about taking these Kickstarter projects and getting them, you know, having a second life and a long life through traditional publishing. You know, there are definitely examples here and there of books that have done that. There's also examples. I mean, like in my own work, you know, having these ABC Disgusting and having these kids' books has been incredible, because I can, you know, I can sell them at cons, and they're the most profitable thing I sell, because you know, the only cost at this point is printing costs. All the other costs were paid for through the Kickstarter. You know, so so there's that. You know, just on a individual, part of my career is going to cons level. Kickstarter, that's a place you can distribute your Kickstarter book, and it can be a really great thing if it's that kind of book that can sell year after year. But yeah, this bigger thing of getting them out into the world, licensing them to other folks and letting other folks distribute them. Also, you're selling through Amazon right now, aren't you? Or
Yeah, I put through my own accounts.
Yeah.
It's almost like consignment.
Right.
But I do like that better than returns. I went with Barnes & Nobles, and they just sent me back like 50 damaged shelf-worn copies. And so Amazon is just, you put it up yourself, you type out the information, you put it out there, and when you get an order, they'll keep some in stock, and they'll just keep ordering more as they need. So I find that's an easy way to kind of just, you know, connect that with your self-publishing method.
yeah, I need to look into that. I haven't done the Amazon thing yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's good just to have it up there, you know. But it's almost like doing it yourself.
Well, even beyond Kickstarter, I mean, in terms of self-publishing and getting the work out there to either get attention or start to have a plan for where it's going after, I think that's going to be the interesting thing, because of all the licensing, all the rights, all the online on-demand versus the big publishing houses, all the new ones that are popping up, the massive attraction to the freedom of small publishing companies, and the new books they're putting out that aren't reminiscent of the old publishers that are taking chances and they're becoming successful, much like Kickstarter and all this stuff that's going on. Like, this is an insane, crazy time for all of this transition and development. It is going to be really interesting to see where distribution, publishing, and like the reality of these things for a longer shelf life and a larger cultural fluidity in terms of market as well as like readership, how this business shakes out. And I don't know anybody has really found an answer and a formula for that, but there is some great works that are finally making it out, and I think this is kind of one of the main ways that's been happening in the last like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to create the business plan that works for you and be okay with that. And if you do that successfully and don't go outside of your means, I mean, you can always just build one more step on top of that. So you don't necessarily have to feel like you have to learn every new method that comes out. I mean, keep going with it, but don't have to like grab, oh, there's a new digital method here or a new online store here, I mean, just do what you know, do what you love creatively.
And do what lets you do the project.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Whatever allows you to do it. Yeah.
Well, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, getting it out and just having this kind of go through, let alone anything else that you self-publish on your own. I mean, print is validation. So whether it's this one thing, it generally most things through Kickstarter or any other self-publishing means, it's not the end of the career. It's another stepping stone. The project gets out. What do you have next? So maybe finding distribution and really trying to attract for that anthology that you're putting together, or anybody else out there that's interested in self-publishing or just getting together and even just getting a zine out, regardless of whatever case it is or short film or whatever. At some point, that freedom, the art in and of itself, the story in and of itself, is kind of the catalyst and the launching point. And just accomplishing that, I think, is what is the main push and excitement for all of the Kickstarter stuff that or at least that we're involved with and that I've been involved with in the past. And what I'm anxious to see is what impact is this going to have for really kind of expanding the art form, the stories that are out there, the original content. It's great to have this platform, but it still seems like we're in the early discovery days of where it's headed.
Okay. Any other questions? I know we kind of. Oh, yeah.
I guess because there's a series of stories in this one large book, what was the turnaround for each story? Did one story take longer for production, or did you kind of have a set pipeline for each and was able to hit that goal, that deadline for each story?
Yeah, that's a good question. I got to remember to repeat the questions, of course. You asked. Sorry, I'm forgetting the beginning now. So for all the different stories, how long did each one take to develop, and did we have a schedule for that? You said it coming in down the pipeline. Well, as I think I mentioned before, we sort of left it up to the creators how much they wanted to do ahead of time before the campaign was successful. Obviously encouraging work to come in as much as we could for the campaign. But some people wanted to wait till it was afterwards. So Frederik and I set a deadline as soon as we were successful, figuring that I think the longest story was 12 pages. Hopefully, I think it was 2 months from the end of the campaign, and hopefully that each creative team was able to get it done, the 12 pages in that amount of time, or less. I'd say we got about a third of the stories in almost right away. Maybe we got to about half after that 2-month deadline. And then, the rest of them were just, all right, well, what is your schedule? This was kind of the deadline that we set. And, some people have things that come up and schedules change. And as editors on a project, especially something like this, I mean, Marvel and DC, you can just sort of be like, you're out, get somebody else to fill them in. But I mean, that's just part of the deal. I mean, we appreciate people being involved in the anthology. I was actually really impressed that everybody fulfilled what they did. Nobody dropped out. Nobody said, oh, you know what, I can't do this. We weren't having to say to our backers, oh, sorry, we promised, I'm sorry if you backed because you wanted to see this artist, he's not in it anymore, or someone else is trying that story. Everybody did, and so we just sort of had to wait a couple more months. I'm forgetting the exact deadline, but I mean, they trickled in. There was another 2 to 3 months of stories kind of trickling in, and finally they all came in, and then we were able to do some production work along the way to have it ready for the printers, and as soon as we got that last one in, we finished it up, did the last bit of design work and sent it off. And we got this out in March, so it was, from the end of the campaign, it was just under 10 months that we got 312-page hardcover book, actually to us, so that counts the printing and getting it shipped to me. So under a year, that's not bad. Yeah.
And it looked like in the last week that you guys weren't even going to make the goal, but you guys were pretty far away. I mean, there was a big ramp up in the last couple days of the campaign.
I mean, we kept moving. I mean, I remember saying, like, there was never a point where we just sort of died. We just weren't moving fast enough to reach $60,000. So I mean, everywhere like, oh, we're at 40,000. Oh, we're at 50,000. But yeah, I think that last week.
Just because I had a real crap moment because I hadn't written my story. I basically had a premise that I pitched the artist that she really liked. And I was like, oh, now I gotta write it.
Everybody was in different positions. Noah Van Sciver sent us his story before the campaign was over. It was like, here you go. I'm like, well, we don't even know if we're gonna do the anthology yet. He's like, all right, whatever. So I mean, it was interesting. 27 stories. So I mean, you can imagine. You just go with it. Whatever people are willing to do. Yeah.
Not to mention 27 egos, or 50 egos, 50 schedules,
50 creators.
Every group project I've been on too.
Yeah, we didn't have a colorist or a letterer, and you guys helped us find
Yeah,
that with
It's
our
always
story.
been a juggle.
Well, Jason Wordy worked with Allison before, right?
Yeah, but I thought you guys put us in touch. Maybe not. I let her handle it.
They did Genesis together. So
Oh,
I'm
okay,
sure
word. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And doesn't Allison letter her own stuff sometimes?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, we had somebody else. Yeah, we had to get some colorists and letters. And like I said, when we mentioned with Taylor's story, there's a time where artists were like, I'll do the whole thing myself. I'll do the line art, color, and letterer. And then you're like, okay. And then they're not getting you even the line work. And they're like, do you want maybe to get us to find a colorist for you? Do you want us to maybe a letterer? And that happens too. That's part of the process. So yeah, it's all the joy of editing. But I mean, back to that ego thing. I was really happy. Everybody was very positive all the way through. Didn't have to deal, other than just, sorry, my schedule doesn't allow for it right now. Can you give me another month or two? Which really wasn't a big deal at the end of it, as long as they did get it in at that time. So it was super easy. I was pretty pleased. I was with dealing with all these guys and girls. All right. Any other questions? No? All right, well, those are really good questions. I didn't cut anybody off from answers? No? Great. Okay, well, I think that's good for concluding the Q&A. We have books available. If you've liked what you heard about this amazing book, you want to come up, please feel free to take a look as well. We have a couple open copies, and we'd be happy to sell you some copies and sign them. We also have a sketchbook as well. Come take a look. All right, great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Hope to see you up here.